Mixing with Mike plugin of the week comes from Universal Audio. It's Hitsville EQ Collection. This is two EQs hailing from Motown Studios or Hitsville Studios, put together in the mid 1960s and had a run there through the mid 70s before moving to LA. And these are the EQ units which were specifically designed and built for that studio. There are two basic EQs that you get with the package. This is included in the UAD system, so that will work with your satellites and your interfaces and all that sort of stuff, and also as part of their Spark subscription. So this would give you the ability to use it natively if you subscribe to their UAD Spark. So that would show up there. And the other EQ here is the mastering EQ. So there were a limited number of these. Essentially, it from the description of it, although they don't actually say it's a passive design EQ, it has all of the elements of a passive design, being that it uses inductors and all of that sort of stuff. So the design elements seem to lean into a passive design. But these were the EQs that were used in the studio for all those Motown records. And they've been emulated by other people. This one is quite cool, though, and it's worth taking a deeper dive. Essentially, what we have here, and maybe I'll kind of zoom in here, and we will take a look at both. We have I don't know, I'll just call it the studio EQ, the primary EQ that was used in studio. What you have are 7 bands, so 7 selected frequencies here. There's a labeling here, for it that's put in. You can make those disappear if you don't like the way that looks just by clicking here. There's one other feature here. Clicking on this will zero out whatever settings that you have. Just be conscious of that, clicking or where you click. There are 3 primary settings here: in, out, and off. The in being the EQ in, along with the electronic emulation. Then there is the out, which will bypass the EQ, but you will get the effect of the transformers and amplifier stages that it goes through. And off is a hard bypass for everything. So those are your 3 stages there. You have an output gain to make up for everything. Everything works in discrete positions. So you have fixed frequencies, and then you have discrete boost and attenuation points with in 1 dB steps. So you can kind of work with that. The frequencies are very useful for almost anything, for vocals, for guitars, for a mix, pretty much everything, for drums. And so you can kind of work within it. There's always a little bit of trickery whenever you kind of have some of these fixed EQ type of things. And most of that is made up for with the output gain, where you could boost more heavily into certain frequencies. And then using the attenuation knob, you get an automatic attenuation of everywhere else except for where you boosted. So there's some ways to kind of use this in a little bit more of an advanced way. And maybe I'll demonstrate a little bit of that. So this is the primary studio EQ, and this is the more rare one. There were 46 of these units that were made. There were only a handful, about 6 of the mastering EQs made. So the mastering EQ is also a 7-band, and there's some very interesting features. One that down on the bottom here, I'm just going to zoom out just a touch here, if my zoom works. Oh, there we go. And okay, so what we have is a control link for left and right, no issue there. A filter stage, I'll get into that. You could also set it to work in mid-side, so you could work it in mid-side mode. So this is perfectly set up for, back then for a cutting lathe type of operation. And that would allow you to adjust EQs separately for the mid or the side, or if you unlink them for the left and right. So you have some controls either way there. At the different frequencies, you could either peak or dip. So you could boost or attenuate at any given band. It sort of comes with some settings. I kind of messed it up a little bit, where there's specific things that are by default set to dip and by default set to peak. And so there's some information there embedded in those default settings kind of coming up that way. And it's important to kind of look at it from that perspective, and I'll explain. Again, you get the dB steps on the attenuation up to 8 dB. in and out switch, just a hard bypass. Now, there's an interesting feature here because you'll see on the red tags here the numbers, and this is for half speed. So part of one way of cutting records or cutting the lacquer back then was to cut it at half speed, what they call a half speed master. They did this, they kind of revisited this again when they did the direct metal masters, where they were cut into copper plates instead of cutting into lacquer, which is a bit more consistent, better cut. And they would cut them at half speed, and it would increase the quality because the cutting head wouldn't have to work as hard. So when you get to those higher frequencies, it generally would give you a cleaner, more accurate high frequency response, and overall more accuracy. The issue is that when you cut it at half speed, you have to play the master into it at half speed. And so if your mix was on a half-inch machine at 30, you play it back at 15. That also changes the frequency response. But then if you process it with any form of EQ, that has to shift as well. And so they factored that in by having a switch built in for half frequencies. So it would take the existing frequencies and split them by half for exactly that process. So there's a little bit of a lesson here. So, that's obviously not going to work that way for you. It's not going to slow your song down by half. But it also gives you a bunch of extra frequencies that you wouldn't otherwise have. So it basically doubles the number of frequencies that you can work with if you're working with the EQ. So these are all pretty self-explanatory. The only other thing is the filter stage. So here you have no filter. Then you have a high-pass filter set to 70 hertz. You have a low-pass filter set to 15K. And then you have a combination high-pass, low-pass that is 70 and 15. So it just takes the two filters there. And this is a what they call a steep elliptical high-pass, low-pass filter, right? So that's basically the way that they designed it. Yeah, and otherwise it sounds pretty amazing. I don't know if it's going to turn your song into a Motown record by any stretch of the imagination. But you could take what you have to work with, and maybe it gives you a bit more interesting kind of tonal characteristics or some kind of unique sound that you can bring into it. So, of course, instead of having a Motown type song from that era prepared, since this was just released this morning, I thought, all right, I'll slap together something out. And I've been working on this mix in the live classes here for Mixing with Mike. You can get to that through mixingwithmike.com. Then we could work with some basic things. So let's just start with a simple EQ on a vocal.
Clutch onto this sinking ship, delude me into a state of bliss, offer me some peace in kind, rectify my inconsolable mind. Clutch onto this sinking ship, delude me into a state of bliss, offer me some peace in kind, rectify my inconsolable mind. Clutch onto this sinking ship, delude me into a state of bliss, offer me some peace in kind, rectify my inconsolable mind.
You can hear how instantly you can kind of open up a sound, here.
Clutch onto this sinking ship, delude me into a state of bliss, offer me some peace in kind, rectify my inconsolable mind.
So one quality that I always listened for with emulations, and I think this is just the quality of emulations is improved incredibly. I've never worked with any of these Motown EQs as I've understood them to be called. But I can hear the clarity. It sounds very much like a passive EQ. And then most of the tonal coloration that you get, to whatever degree you get it, is through the transformers and amplification stages. I don't believe there are any tubes. There's nothing that was talked about from that perspective. But there's a clarity and a musicality to it which really comes through. So as you push into different frequencies, it doesn't sound unnatural. One of the other aspects of this is that it is a proportional cue. So as you boost more, it focuses more. As you attenuate more, it narrows the bandwidth of the boost or attenuation. All right, so that's just a quick thing there. Let's just see if if I go back here and then just do a guitar part here, see if we can get a little bit of something out of that. Again, giving you a good amount of flexibility to push in a variety of different tones. I can make it a bit brighter, pulling back on this and pushing into 2K. And that would give me a bit more presence, or I could get a little bit more body and you know, kind of a little bit of a richer tone by pushing into 800. And there's a little bit of a thing here with these about, you know, going and having dips around where the frequencies that you're boosting. That sometimes helps. Like you push into this and it's like, okay, now the 5K ends up being too much, so pulling back on it. There is a little bit of band interaction as well, which they captured into it, meaning that the tonal character of one band will influence another as the bell curves overlap each other. I assume. I don't know how much of a phase crossover there is, but you know, pushing into one band heavily may affect the way that another band sounds, you know, and this is true with a lot of most vintage EQs. All right, this is just kind of some basic things. I've always done a bunch of drums and stuff like that for this, so I thought I'd save take this out and kind of go in a little bit more to the mastering EQ for the whole mix. And while the mix is hardly done, at least we can get a little bit more of a sense of what's going on with this to see how well it works. All right, so we have a mastering EQ here. I'm going to leave it on normal band here, and then let's just kind of play around with it here. I'll start with it in stereo mode, right? So right now I'm in left-right mode, controls linked, no filter, and let's play around a little bit. Here we go.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss.
So if you're confused, remember there's no way to get rid of the labels here for the half speed like there is with the other. This will just add the numbers on the band, and if you click here, it'll just normal out your EQ. So that's what we got. Here we go.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable mind. Futile attempts to throw you away, I've reconciled with hopes of change. It claws away at my carapace, the semblance of a tender
just push just a little bit in here into some mid-range. Yeah.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable mind.
Okay, so here's where it gets a little fun. So now if I unlink this here, and then I also now have, on my output side here, I have mid-side level control, so I can increase the gain of the side channel.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss.
That only works, I was just pushing up the right side. If you switch it to mid-side mode. Whew. Okay, here we go.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable mind.
So instead of maybe pushing into the sides, I can dip here on the sides at 50 hertz. Let's see, 130, I'll leave a little bit of that in. For the guitars, maybe I'll dip back on that and push in a bit. Oh, it's at 400, so maybe I'll dip in a little bit at 400 and push into. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, 800. See, I'm telling you like to not fall for that, and I'm falling for it. Here we go.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable mind.
There's also an auto solo feature which they added in. So if you click on a band when you're in mid-side mode and the controls are unlinked, then you will hear the side information. It'll be placed center, but you'll hear it when you either switch from peak dip, or if you adjust the gain on a band or just click on it.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable mind. Few attempts to throw you away, I've reconciled with hopes of change. It claws away at my carapace, the assemblies of tenderness. Surprise yourself with all I have, and I am glad.
Anyway, it's pretty cool. I really dig the EQ. It has a certain sound and vibe to it, for sure. Something you have to kind of dig in and get a little bit used to. Might be worth at least a demo to check it out. If you have a UA system, or if you're on the Spark thing, you get it automatically. Play around with it, and pretty cool thing. I mean, for something like this, even if you didn't use it for mastering, it would be great for just a drum stem return, that type of thing. Vocal stem return, give you some options, allow you to do a little bit of mid-side processing as well. Maybe if you have the vocal and a lot of effects, it'll help you to sort of expand on the effects a little bit by bringing that up, or kind of manipulating a bit of the side information versus the center information. It's really cool. Sounds great, and sort of a very unique thing. There were not a lot of these, as with many classics like the Fairchilds and stuff like that, where there are a limited number of them that were made. Just makes them that more special and rare, and it has a unique sound. So there you have it, from Universal Audio, just released this morning. So I slammed this demo together for you, and there it is. Plugin of the week from Universal Audio, Hitsville EQ Collection, mixing with Mike.